We've talked about aging, we've talked about menopause, we've talked about ovaries, how they age, how we might slow down the aging of ovaries, and where the science is heading. But today I want to talk about you, not the research, not the lab mice, you sitting there living in a body that's changing faster than our culture knows how to support. This is the final episode of our 4-part series on ovarian aging, menopause, and longevity. And this one is about the menopause movement and where it's headed. Let's talk about a real patient story and the disconnect. Someone I met recently, she's 52, a lawyer, fiercely intelligent. And she told me, I can't focus in the courtroom anymore. I wake up drenched in sweat. I'm gaining weight even though I eat clean. And no one is connecting the dots. She's been to her primary care doctor, a cardiologist, a neurologist, even a psychiatrist, all well-meaning. But none of them said, this is menopause, this is treatable, this is a systemic transition, not just a set of scattered symptoms. That woman, she is all of us. And we can't keep pretending that women should just white-knuckle their way through the second half of life. My mission is to support women through midlife. I call it the second half strategy. It's not about quick fixes or pretending we're 30 again. It's about supporting the systems that matter most so we can stay strong, clear, connected, and on mission. That means supporting the brain, memory, focus, and mood, protecting the bones and muscles so we stay mobile and independent, calming the cardiovascular system, reducing inflammation, stabilizing blood sugar and lipids, and restoring hormone balance because estradiol, progesterone, and testosterone aren't luxuries, they are regulators. And understanding the role of stress, sleep, detox, digestion, and resilience. At menopause, our ovaries go quiet, but life doesn't. So we work to ensure you have the support you need to live your life with joy and purpose. Now, having said that, I want to zoom out for a moment because while you and I are doing this work, connecting the dots, restoring health, reclaiming power, something bigger is happening. The world is starting to wake up. Researchers, policymakers, even the federal government, is kind of beginning to understand what you and I have known all along, that menopause is not a footnote in a woman's life. It's a turning point, and it's time it got the attention it deserves. So what is the shift happening now? This is the good news. We are in a moment of massive change. It started, as these things often do, with a woman asking a better question. Dr. Jennifer Garrison, a neuroscientist and reproductive aging expert at the Buck Institute, had been saying something out loud that most researchers were not really saying. She said, why do the ovaries age first? And what happens if we change that? For decades, menopause had been treated like a closed case, a natural, inevitable biological shutdown. Unpleasant, yes, but not worth much scientific inquiry. Dr. Garrison disagreed. She calls the ovary the control center of aging in women. She saw menopause not as a life stage to endure, but as a biological inflection point, a moment that sets off a cascade of changes across the brain, bones, heart, metabolism, and immune system. And she began to argue, convincingly, that if we could delay ovarian failure, we might not just extend fertility, we might extend health span itself. Her vision struck a nerve. Ovarian rejuvenation as a doorway to longevity? Tell me more. In 2023, the tide began to turn. In February 2024, First Lady Dr. Jill Biden took the stage and announced a historic commitment, $100 million in federal funding for research into women's midlife health. The initiative, backed by the White House and rooted in conversations between Biden and advocates like Maria Shriver, finally put menopause at the center of the public health conversation. It wasn't just about hot flashes anymore. It was about productivity, longevity, equity, and innovation. It was about the lost decades of hormone-related vulnerability that half the population lives through, with almost no medical guidance or precision interventions. For the first time, women heard their experiences named not as nuisances, but as unmet medical needs. And the US government wasn't just listening, it was investing. ARPA-H. That $100 million didn't go to just any agency. It was routed through ARPA-H, the Advanced Research Projects Agency for Health, a Biden-era creation modeled after DARPA, the agency that once gave the world GPS, the internet, and mRNA vaccines. ARPA-H was designed to do what traditional science agencies often cannot: fund big, bold, high-risk projects that could radically transform health. Think moonshots in health, not incremental science. In 2024, ARPA-H launched the Sprint for Women's Health, focusing on what they called pain points in women's lives: menopause, heart disease, autoimmune conditions, and cognitive decline. For once, researchers were encouraged to think ambitiously about women's health, not as an afterthought, but as a frontier. Funded proposals included everything from ovarian longevity platforms to hormone-producing implants to technologies that could detox the brain during sleep. Dr. Garrison's lab became a key voice in shaping this new era. So did startups like Gamete, Oviva, and Cellmatex, all working on therapies to delay ovarian aging or mimic its hormonal outputs. There was real momentum. It felt like the beginning of a new chapter in women's health, one led by scientists, physicians, patients, and a government finally catching up. And then the wind shifted. In January 2025, the administration changed. President Trump returned to office, and with him came a sharp pivot in health policy. By February, ARPA-H's founding director, Dr. Garrison, had been dismissed. Funding pipelines stalled. The fiscal 2026 budget slashed health research across the board, including an $18 billion cut to the National Institutes of Health. ARPA-H, once the bright new hope for rapid innovation, found itself gutted and restructured under a new umbrella agency, the Administration for a Healthy America, or AHA. Dozens of programs were frozen or cancelled outright, including those focused on menopause, brain health, and reproductive longevity. The sprint slowed to a crawl. And then something small but extraordinary came from the Menopause Society at the beginning of June 2025. They announced their Next Gen Now initiative, a $10 million national education and training program designed to equip the current and next generation of healthcare providers with what most of them were never taught: how to care for midlife women. This effort is backed by a $5 million anonymous donation and aims to raise $5 million more so that 25,000 healthcare professionals can be reached over the next 3 years and trained. We are talking immersive training, scholarships, study materials, and even exploring augmented virtual reality. This is not on the scale of government agency funding, but it's something, and it's much needed. It seems like a silence has returned to the big efforts in the world of women's health, but not entirely. With the change in policies by the Trump administration, it's tempting to call this the end of the menopause moonshot, but that would be premature because something irreversible happened in the last few years. Menopause became visible. It entered the public discourse. It showed up in budgets, in headlines, and university research centers. Women started asking questions, demanding real answers, and building businesses and labs to fill the gap. Even if ARPA-H's direction has changed, the energy that was unleashed hasn't disappeared. It's moved elsewhere, into private research, global funding coalitions, grassroots momentum, and women like you and me who will not take no for an answer. For decades, women's health was an afterthought in science, dismissed, underfunded, and misunderstood. But the tide has turned. A crescendo of momentum has built through various efforts and initiatives until the recent political whiplash. But here's the thing, you can't control a tempest in a bottle. Women are done being relegated to the margins of science and medicine. The fire is burning. This is no longer a niche conversation. It's a movement, and we will find a way. Through innovation, through solidarity, through sheer force of will. The science hasn't stopped, and neither have the women. So, if you've listened to this series and thought, why didn't anyone tell me this? You're not alone. Also, now you know. Now you have language. Now you have insight. You have the permission to ask for more. You have the audacity to ask for more. You deserve care that sees the whole woman, that treats hormone health as brain health, that connects fatigue and anxiety to deeper physiology, that plans for the decades ahead, not just the next lab result. Health and longevity that enable you to live with joy and purpose. So, I see menopause as a double inflection point. On one curve, women begin to rise toward emotional clarity, creative power, and a deeper sense of self. They say what they mean, they stop shrinking, they feel more themselves than they ever have. But there's another curve that bends downwards. This is the quiet decline in physical resilience, brain fog, brittle bones, loss of libido, creeping insulin resistance, rising inflammation. It's the biological cost of hormonal silence. My work is about aligning those curves, so the upward rise of emotional freedom isn't shadowed by physical collapse. So women don't have to sacrifice vitality or authenticity. So we don't fall apart right when we are finally coming into our own. Because here's the truth. Health, longevity, joy, and purpose go together. If you don't have health, it is hard to be joyful and fulfill your purpose. A woman who is clear-eyed and alive to herself deserves a body that can carry her dreams, not betray them. And longevity, real longevity, isn't about tacking on years at the end. It's about having the energy, the memory, the mood, the strength, and the libido to keep showing up for the life you want to lead. It's about dancing at your daughter's or granddaughter's wedding without aching knees, speaking up in the boardroom without brain fog, starting something new at 60 or 70 without being told or thinking that it's too late. This is not about denying age. It's about honoring this season by supporting the biology that allows us to live it fully. So yes, in this 4-part series, we've talked about ovarian aging, menopause, and longevity. If you've liked the series, please like and share with friends and family. I'm Dr. Mana, and I'm building a world where women in midlife are not dismissed, overlooked, or diminished, but are equipped, supported, and celebrated. You made it through all 4 episodes. Thank you. Thank you for being curious. Thank you for being courageous. And thank you for being the kind of woman who doesn't settle for decline.